Welcome to Hunter Beyond Time and Space Chapter 6. The Brave Soldier Crossing the River. Before the middle-aged man looked up, Qingchen thought he was deaf. The commotion around him had no effect on him whatsoever. However, when the middle-aged man looked up, Qingchen almost thought he was deaf because the noisy square suddenly became quiet in an instant, without any extra noise. The surprised expressions in the eyes of the surrounding crowd, as well as some inexplicable emotions, seemed to be a foil for the middle-aged man's identity. Because in the past, this middle-aged man had never paid attention to anyone's pleas. Suddenly, Qingchen breathed a sigh of relief, because all of this proved that he had made the right bet. The middle-aged man didn't say anything to him, but calmly pushed the front pawn of the red side on the chessboard to advance one step. And the black side he held himself chose to move the elephant to retreat 7 steps and killed the just arched pawn. Qingchen watched the chessboard quietly from a distance. The 4 bandits capture the king endgame is a famous endgame on Earth, with 2 layout forms. The one in front of him is the more dangerous one. The so-called endgame generally means that the black side must win, and the red side cannot even achieve a draw. If it is a draw, even if this endgame is solved. However, Qingchen was not satisfied with a draw. This endgame of the 4 bandits capture the king is somewhat peculiar. The 4 fierce pawns of the red side have already flown over the Chu River and reached the bottom line, and both cars are in place. The situation seemed to be evenly matched, but in fact, this endgame was full of killing opportunities and traps at every step. The black side only needed 1 step to win the game, while the red side could only run around and was in danger of being killed if it was not careful. This is a dead end that seems to be full of hope but can make people gradually fall into despair. Continue, the middle-aged man said calmly. Qingchen said, pawn to the 3rd file. The middle-aged man's eyes lit up. At this point, he seemed to have a real interest and was too lazy to fiddle with the chessboard. He closed his eyes and played blind chess with Qingchen. King's pawn advances 1 step. Qingchen also closed his eyes, rear car advances 4 steps. The elephant retreats 9 steps. At the 6th turn, Qingchen suddenly said, Car 1 advances 7 steps. The middle-aged man's closed eyes opened again, and he looked at Qingchen in surprise. The elephant retreats 7 steps. In the first 5 steps, there was nothing special, but after the 6th step, the 2 sides began to exchange pieces step by step. You kill me. I kill you. Blood flowed into rivers, and the soldiers were everywhere. The 2 sides were extremely cruel and decisive on the chessboard. They were like the calmest generals on the battlefield, willing to sacrifice everything for the final victory. The endgame of the 4 bandits capture the king even forced the 2 of them to burst out a heroic spirit, but behind this heroic spirit, there were calculations from both sides. At the beginning of the game, although the red side of Qingchen was more aggressive with its 4 pawns across the river, he sacrificed each pawn 1 by 1 in exchange for other strategies, leaving only the last one. Car 1 moves to the 4th file. General 4 moves to the 5th file. Cannon 4 moves to the 5th file. Car 3 moves to the 5th file. On the 15th move, Qingchen finally breathed a long sigh of relief and said, Pawn advances to the 1st file. The game was up. It wasn't until this moment that the endgame of the 4 bandits capture the king finally burst out an indescribable charm, and the situation of killing and solving each other on the boundary of the Chu River and Han Dynasty made the middle-aged man feel like he was really confronting a strategist on the battlefield. Every step of this game was extremely dangerous. What surprised the middle-aged man the most was that although Qingchen was not very old, he did not hesitate at all when abandoning pieces for a better layout. Abandoning and not giving up is important, but war is war. How can there be no sacrifice in war? He looked at the teenager in front of him quietly, and the other party also looked at him, with a serious and stubborn expression. It seemed that they were trying to fight out a way to survive in this desperate situation and open up a new life. He understood that he was playing chess while the other party was trying to survive in an environment surrounded by steel beasts, and their attitudes were different. No one noticed that at this moment, 81 out of the 210 surveillance cameras in this prison fortress were directly focused on Qingchen. There seemed to be a vortex shrinking in the black camera lens of the surveillance camera, as if focusing on Qingchen's face. No one knows who is focusing behind these surveillance cameras. The middle-aged man smiled and inverted the black general on the chessboard. Interesting, there are not many people who can play chess nowadays. Let's continue tomorrow. After speaking, he walked towards the book area with his hands behind his back, leaving the chessboard on the table that no one dared to move. The gray cat on the table stood up quietly and followed the middle-aged man. When the cat curled up, it looked like a ball of fluff and didn't look big. However, when it stretched out, Qingchen found that this cat was unusually large, more than 1 meter long, and extremely agile. Ordinary cats walk lightly and are called cat steps. This cat walks in a tiger-like posture. Everyone on the square who was paying attention here was stunned. Did the teenager actually win this endgame? To be honest, they didn't understand chess, and they couldn't even understand blind chess when the two sides played it. There are too many entertainment activities in this era, and each one is more exciting and fun than chess. They can directly obtain pleasure with chips, and can even log into the virtual network with their consciousness. This is a very cheap era of happiness. Few people play chess, and even if you play well, can you beat artificial intelligence? However, their surprise at Qingchen winning against the middle-aged man was because in their eyes, how could that middle-aged man lose? Regardless of whether it was chess or fighting, how could the opponent lose? To be honest, Qingchen was also a bit strange. This middle-aged man clearly didn't even have a mechanical body, nor did he have his two followers by his side. Why was he so prestigious in this prison where steel beasts roamed? The young man who had previously stopped Qingchen winked at him and said, "Impressive. My name is Lin Xiaoxiao, and his name is Yuan. We'll see each other tomorrow." After speaking, he followed the middle-aged man and Yuan and left. At this time, Qingchen didn't even know the middle-aged man's name, only the names of his two followers, but it was undoubtedly a good start. The tense atmosphere in the square didn't relax until the middle-aged man, along with Yuan and Lin Xiaoxiao, went to the reading area. The prisoner who was welcoming new inmates was still dragging new people into the cell, including him. There were a total of 12 new people, and 9 of them had already been pulled in. At this point, when Qingchen looked at the prisoners again, no one was interested in him anymore. Suddenly, a young man with mechanical legs ran up to Qingchen and said anxiously, "We're all newcomers. Help me, and I'll listen to you in the future." The prisoners around them looked at him coldly. They were still a bit unsure of the situation, and Qingchen certainly couldn't move, but if this young man wanted to protect other new inmates, they wouldn't object either. However, Qingchen didn't seem to hear what the young man said at all, and his expression was calm as if he hadn't heard anything. The prisoners laughed and forcibly dragged the young man away. The young man shouted, "My uncle is a director of the Longming Company in the 17th city. You." Before he could finish speaking, the other prisoners laughed and said, "Other than the big 5 companies, other companies are not worth mentioning. Even if your uncle comes to this prison fortress, he still has to behave himself." Qingchen quietly listened to everything and absorbed all the useful information. He had just been identifying the identities of these new inmates and wanted to see if there were any other Earthlings hidden among them. He had crossed over and had no memories belonging to this world. Even now, he didn't know how many years he had been sentenced for. Qingchen believed that the others didn't have memories either, so those who could talk about relationships outside of prison were probably not his compatriots. Out of the 12 new cellmates, there should only be him and the teen who had a breakdown who were Earthlings. For some reason, Qingchen didn't feel any sense of discouragement. Instead, he was somewhat excited about his completely different life. A completely different life. This sentence sounds very tempting. When your own life is already a mess, someone puts a button in front of you and says, "Press this, and you will have an extraordinary life." But after pressing it, there are two possibilities. It may be better. It may also be worse. Will you press it? Qingchen thinks he should press it. On Earth, he seems to have been a superfluous person, his father regards him as a burden, his mother has a new family, and his relatives rarely interact with him. Qingchen has spent 2 Chinese New Years alone. Therefore, if your past life is dark, then no matter how dangerous, unknown, and terrifying the new world is, it will still make people look forward to it. This world is different. Coming here from Earth is like an adventure in rebellion and a liberation from the past for Qingchen. If it weren't for the countdown incident, he should have studied hard, worked hard to support himself, and then relied on his unique memory to study at a good and distant university, never to return. But, that kind of life still seems meaningless. He believes that there are not many people who have traveled with him on Earth. Even if there are thousands or tens of thousands, they are still a small proportion compared to the total population. This makes him feel special.